Good morning, Vienna. I'm very proud to be here. Thanks for the invitation and for looking really forward to this day of great talks and panels. So I'm going to talk to you about this organization called Sony AI and some of the projects that we're doing to try and transform Sony into an AI-powered company. But before I go there, I did want to tell you a little bit about Sony. So you might know Sony as an electronics company, right? So the TVs, the audio equipment, and of course that is still a very important part of the company, but it's actually a rather small part of the company today. In fact, 60% of the revenue of Sony comes from entertainment. And so that is gaming, so that's iconic brands like PlayStation Studios, which is creating the content. That's Sony Pictures, which is very much engaged in movie production, TV production, in some cases in streaming. An iconic brand of this is Columbia Pictures, which you may know from many famous movie titles. And then also Sony Music. So Sony Music is the second largest music publisher in the world. And so that combined is 60% of the revenue. And we still do electronics, like TVs and so on, and that's very important to the company. But there's also another part of the company that many people don't realize is part of Sony. Sony is the largest CMOS image sensor producer in the world, right? So your smartphone, about 50% chance that the sensor for the camera is coming from Sony. And then in Japan, we also have financial services. And so Sony AI is an organization that is catering to all these parts of Sony and trying to transform the company into an AI-powered company. And what that means for us is primarily AI for creativity. So that is around game production, movie production, music creation. But it's also focusing on the chip designers and the people that create new semiconductors in order to bring image processing into the world. And we also have projects on real-world entertainment as well as scientific discovery, all focusing on really creators. And so I think one of the differences that we bring to the table is we work with people across the company on a day-to-day basis, artists, chip designers. And what we would like to do is to develop this technology together and for people. And so this is where our mission comes from. Our mission is to unleash human imagination and creativity with AI. Just briefly, Sony AI is the strategic R&D unit for Sony. We're directly reporting to headquarters, to the CTO of the whole group, as well as the CEO. We were established 4 years ago. We have offices in Tokyo, in Zurich, Barcelona, Bangalore, Mumbai, as well as Boston. But we also work with people across many countries in a remote way, because obviously Sony has many offices across the world, so we can basically hire wherever we find the best talent. We're about 200 people and a very international group of people from all continents except Antarctica. Just to give you a little bit of a high-level overview of some of the projects we're doing, so we work a lot on AI ethics. That's a really core part to us, specifically because of this interaction between the technology and people. We work a lot on generative AI, specifically for creation of images, music, speech, 3D. We obviously have a strong team working on computer vision, so we work on foundation models there. We work on AI for chip design. And we also work on using AI to bring more content from the world to the whole of the world. So around translation, subbing, and so on. And then there's one project which I think has been really successful, and that's the one I really want to talk to you about today. And that project is called Gran Turismo Sophy, and it is one of our key flagship projects. But it's also a project that very clearly shows how we think about transformation within Sony and how we would like to influence the company to really adopt AI going forward. And so this is a project, Gran Turismo Sophy. It is the name of a racing agent. Okay, we developed that racing agent for the game Gran Turismo, which is a 25-year PlayStation title. It's been very successful franchise that is part of PlayStation for a very, very long time. And what we build is a racing agent that can compete at the highest level with some of the best esports professionals in the sport of racing, specifically on Gran Turismo. Now, what is interesting here is that when we built this racing agent, we actually created a really high-level technology breakthrough that was recognized to be on the cover of Nature, which obviously is one of the biggest scientific journals, maybe the most important scientific journal in the world. And it was not just published there, but it also made it on the cover. And I'll tell you a little bit about the story of why this is, why it's interesting, and how it helped us in this transformation process that we're leading inside Sony. But before I go there, I'll show you a quick video.
The There's very few places where you can go out and say, I'm going to build an AI and I'm going to make it truly superhuman.
We're going to create artificial intelligence that will unleash the power of the human creativity and imagination.
Gran Turismo Sophy is a super exciting project. It's an amazing AI research and development activity.
There are many racing games where the physics is half done, but in Gran Turismo, that racing sensation that the players get, that's really at the core of the game.
このなんか車文化、車という存在をもう丸ごとビデオゲームの中にこう再現したいなと思ったんですね。
Because of the realism of the game, it is actually very difficult to program agents.
We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what things we needed to change in order to get that superhuman performance.
Why are we building this GT Sophy agent?
This is not just a technical breakthrough project, but it really is about bringing AI into the hands of the game developers who are going to build the new experiences for the players.
本当にすごいアグレッシブで、これからもっと一緒にレースをしていきたいなっていうふうに思いましたね。
All right, so there you go. So it's a really big technical breakthrough, and just want to very briefly explain why that is the case. So Gran Turismo is a highly real physical simulation of racing. In fact, you might have seen a movie called Gran Turismo, which incidentally is produced by Sony, which is about a racer that, some kid from the UK, Jan Maddenborough, and he learned to race in the game. And then within 3 months, he was drafted into a Nissan Academy to race real race cars. Right? He had never done that before in his life. And within 3 months, he transitioned to being a real race car driver, and he was actually successful in that. Basically racing against some of the best professionals in the actual racing world. So that tells you something about the physical realism of the game. And so the agent had to learn to master that, right? And racing is really interesting because racing is sort of at the edge of control, right? So a very small move or change in steering can be the difference between the best lap of your life and a crash. And so the agent mastered that. But this is not where it stops, right? It's not just you versus the track. Once you have other racers on the track, they actually change the physics again. So if you have a car in front of you, your braking cycle, your acceleration, all of those things change. And of course, if you try to overtake somebody, that person is going to fight back. So you have to sort of master the tactics of the game. And then finally, sports etiquette. So sports etiquette is really interesting because it's a relatively vague concept. So obviously, you can't just crash into other cars in the real world. That could lead to injuries or death. But I really would describe racing as a sort of dance, which is both collaborative and competitive. So you have to sort of collaborate, not to basically crash into other cars and just throw everybody off track. But at the same time, you're trying to win, right? And so you're trying to be competitive. And mastering this is a real breakthrough, and this is the reason why that project made it on the cover of Nature. We use a technique called deep reinforcement learning. It's relatively famous. You might have heard about some breakthroughs around Go and other games. Very, very briefly, what you do is you train an AI agent based on information that you get from the world. In this case, the world is the game. So it is a GT Sport, and you can roughly think of this as information that will be available to an autonomous car. So that could be vision and some other features. And then, of course, you're taking actions, right? So the agent has to take actions, whether to brake or steer, and that can influence the next state of the game. And then finally, the way this agent is trained is a neural network that learns to drive from scratch, doesn't know anything about the world, and then learns to drive very good, and then drive superhuman, is something called reward. And the reward tells the agent whether it is doing something that's good or whether he's doing something that's bad. And so obviously crashes are bad, losing a position on track is bad, but overtaking, being fast, that's good. And that's all that we need to train this agent from scratch to be the best racer. It's a really important collaboration across many groups of Sony. So obviously we worked with the game developer, they're called Polyphony Digital, based in Japan. but we also used massive infrastructure to train these agents. And that infrastructure was provided to us by Sony Interactive Entertainment, which is basically PlayStation. What they have is they have a lot of compute across the world that's usually used by gamers for streaming, but gamers are only awake from 3 a.m. to 10 a.m., so there's a lot of time that we can use actually to train agents. We did many different combinations of cars and track to show that the agent can really be successful in not just one car-track combination, and we raced some of the best drivers, and then obviously we had many events, and then in one event, the final event, we actually achieved a superhuman score, beating the humans on all car-track combinations. So that's step one, but this is not the end of the story, because for us it's important that it's good to be superhuman, but we want to be helpful and interesting to people. And so there's some really encouraging remarks here from some of the best drivers that basically tell us that they're now starting to learn from these agents how to drive better in their own way. This is one of the races, so I'm going to challenge you to tell me which of those cars is driven by the AI versus by a human racer. And it also gives you a sort of impression of how tight these races can be and how competitive they can be and how fun they also can be for the human drivers. And the human driver in this case is the white car. Right? And in this particular race, they were racing really for a long time against each other and very competitively. Now, we can train these agents not just to be superhuman, but we can train them to do all sorts of fun stuff. And so here we trained an agent to really maximize drifting. And again, this is very difficult to do for humans. And it basically provides a first example of how to do drifting in this game at a very high level. And now this can be used also by humans to learn these new skills. Now, the last part of the story, so the superhuman success was number one. But what we then did is we moved this agent to be able to drive at many different levels and at all cars and track combinations across the game, and then integrated it into the game. So if you buy Gran Turismo 7, which is the current version of the game today, you can actually race against GT Sophy. And so we made it into product, and that was actually done within 1 year of the big scientific breakthrough. And what you see here is just a launch trailer, which is basically a part of the marketing and the commercialization of this technology to the players based on the amazing feedback that we got, not just from the best drivers, but from players around the world. So I think this is the important part of the story, right? So we chose a difficult problem that we weren't able to solve before using traditional methods. We applied AI. It was a big technical breakthrough. We validated this externally through the Nature publication. And then it took us about a year to bring that technology essentially to the masses, to the millions of players that are playing Gran Turismo on a daily basis. Now, that's step one. We believe that this technology can not just be important for racing games, but it can be important for all the games that are part of the PlayStation universe. But before we had this breakthrough, it was very difficult to make that argument. And now, because we have that big breakthrough, we do have the commercialization, we can now have discussions and conversations with other game developers on how this technology can change the way they are developing their games. And that's really the most important story here, or part of the story that hinges on transformation. So obviously, I come from research. I'm really excited about Nature papers. I'm also an engineer. I really like doing product. But what's more important to me from the Sony AI broader perspective is how do we use these projects to drive the transformation across Sony, not just for agents or gaming, but across all the different business sectors that we're interested in. And of course, you have to start somewhere. And what we start is essentially the big breakthroughs, the things that inspire the developers, the creators across the company to take on this technology and think about how they can use it in their daily developments, in their next product. And for us, it's important to do these Nature papers to inspire that confidence and give that inspiration. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg, because what really survives are the things that we build while we're doing this, which are much deeper and sometimes a little bit more boring than the Nature papers. So one of the things we did, and I kind of hinted at that, is we not just had the racing agent, but we built a whole platform, a whole infrastructure of training these agents for games. And we validated that using Gran Turismo, but now we can basically onboard any game on PlayStation, and we can train agents to do that. But all of this can only be done if you hire the best people. And so one of the things that we did in the process of doing all of this is we set up Sony AI, we built new HR policies, We build new compensation policies in order to attract and retain the best talent. And those are the things, right? So if you think about the Nature paper, the impact of a Nature paper is probably a year or 2 years. The data platform and infrastructure, that's probably sort of 5-year type horizons. But if you hire the best people, that can set the company up for change for the next 10 to 20 years. And ultimately, what we're really doing also with Sony AI is we're reinventing the way R&D is done in Sony. So R&D, as I mentioned before, traditionally electronics company, very different type of research or different research structure in terms of how R&D is done. And I think all of these things have to change in order for the company to truly become an AI-enabled company. Thank you very much.